Hello everyone and welcome to this special Business of InfoSec Top 100 USA panel discussion, part 2. My name is Catherine King and I'm the director of the Business of InfoSec team here at Corinium. Now, our guests today are all featured within the InfoSec Top 100 Leaders in Information Security report, Corinium's list of the world's top 100 leaders in information security. This report exists to celebrate the outstanding work of the last 12 months of some of the greatest minds in information security. And we brought a few of them together today to discuss some of those hot questions, challenges, and topics. So let's see who we have today. And it's exciting to see you all in the comment section as well. So I'm going to bring forward our wonderful panel. And boy, do we have a full panel today. I have been very ambitious with the amount of guests we have and the time we have to cover. So what I'm going to tell you to do right now, get your questions and your comments into our guests in the comment section as and when you think of them. Don't wait until the end because we've only got half an hour here today. So welcome to the lovely panel here. And I'm going to ask you, let's do a quick round of introductions. Jack, starting with you, welcome.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. I'm Jack Powell. I am the CISO for Allianz Life Insurance Company of North America, New York.
Welcome, Jack. Thanks so much for joining us. Karen, lovely to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Karen Holmes. I'm the CISO and the Vice President of Core Infrastructure, TrueBlue.
Thank you so much, Karen. Tyler, great to see you.
Great to see you too. My name's Tyler Cohen Wood, and I'm the founder and CEO of My Connected Health.
Thank you, Tyler. Mark, hi.
Good afternoon, all. Mark Eggleston here, CISO and privacy official at Health Partners Plans up in Philadelphia. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Eric, great to see you again.
Always a pleasure. Eric Cole, CEO of Secure Anchor, speaker, author. I got to do a quick promo. My new book, Cyber Crisis, just came out yesterday, and I'm on a mission to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family.
I am loving that energy, Eric. Thank you so much. Lester, let's keep it going. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Lester Godsey, Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer for Maricopa County here in Arizona.
Amazing. Michael, great to see you.
Hey, great to see you, Catherine. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Owens, Business Information Security Officer at Equifax, coming to you today from Atlanta, Georgia.
Amazing. And then last but certainly not least, Maureen, welcome.
Hi, I'm Maureen Allison. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Johnson & Johnson. Michael, thank you for your service in the Marines.
Thank you, ma'am.
Amazing. So I always love to do a round of introductions just to really drive home the expertise we have on this panel discussion. So hello to Herman, Gustavo, Ashwin, Jerry, April, Krista. Christy, goodness me, we've got some great audience members already getting involved. And we've already had 2 questions come in and we've been live for 3 minutes. I'm excited about this panel. But let's get going with the first question that I've got rounded up here today. Now, obviously, COVID-19 has had such an impact on everyone's personal life, professional life, and it's certainly touched the InfoSec community as well. So I'd love to know, how did COVID-19 impact your information security strategy? Did you have to pivot? Did you have to change? Or were you going to keep strong with the strategy you had in place? So Karen, I'll come to you first for that one.
So interestingly enough, it actually did not pivot my security strategy at all. Specifically, I had always built the strategy around being location agnostic and the assumption that people should be able to be empowered to work securely from any location. And in order, and as my co-panelists will attest, attracting and retaining top talent is extraordinarily difficult, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, where you're competing with a lot of tech giants. So giving that flexibility was always a selling point for my organization. So all we did was take the same solutions that I was allowing my cybersecurity team to work with and just ship those over to the business, where people were used to sitting at a desktop and sitting in a cube could work literally from everywhere, just as securely as they did from the office itself. It was just expansion on the existing strategy.
I love that. Thank you so much, Karen, for setting us up on that one. Mark, how about yourself? What did that change in strategy look like for you, or was there even a change due to COVID?
My experience wasn't dramatically different than Karen's, actually. We'd always had a lot of diversification in our tech stack. So having a virtual desktop environment, having laptops, the VPN client, allowing brokered bring your own device technology, all those things paid lots of dividends when March 2020 hit and we moved our entire workforce home, which we remain home now. Other things that were in place, we've had multi-factor authentication or MFA in place for over a decade. So having those things already out there obviously decreased the immediate learning curve, and just having the great groups at Health Partners Plans work together. I mean, hats off to our help desk and our network teams for just rapidly getting PCs in the hands of people who might not have otherwise had them at home, and making sure that just everybody could work remotely was a godsend. So, the only investment that we made up front was we increased our internet bandwidth just as a precautionary measure. Everything else we had on hand, so it was great.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to come to some audience questions because half an hour really is not a lot of time to have with you. So Ashwin asks, to pay or not to pay ransom? What's the latest thinking? Great question. Eric, I'll come to you first for that one. What's your thoughts?
So there's a lot of different theories. Don't negotiate with terrorists. Don't pay the ransom. And all that's great if we're sitting around having some drinks. But the reality is this. Today's ransomware organizations, they've commercialized cyber criminal activity. They target, they know your organization. And the reality is this. If you get hit with ransomware, that means you were vulnerable, you were exposed and compromised. And unfortunately, the only reality today is if you get hit with a bad ransomware attack and you want to get up and running in any reasonable time period, is to go in and pay the ransom. And I'll tell you right now, after Colonial and the recent attacks, almost all of our clients are now going out as part of incident response and setting up Bitcoin accounts. So if they do get hit with ransom, they'll be able to pay the ransom in a relatively quick period of time.
Thank you so much, Eric. Tyler, do you want to weigh in on that one as well?
Sure. I agree with Eric. I know a lot of guidance is not to pay the ransom, but it depends on what the business is. If it's a healthcare business or like the Colonial Pipeline and things have to get back up in a timely manner, then you may have to pay the ransom, but you may have to also go the extra mile too, because oftentimes when ransomware is in your system, backdoors will be left, and there's not necessarily a guarantee that by paying the ransom, you'll be able to unlock all of the files. So I personally think that preventative measures are probably the best, but if you do have to pay the ransom, then that is what you're going to have to do. So I agree with Eric in that sense.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I absolutely love audiences like we have today, because you make my life so much easier in terms of asking the best questions, because I think it's going to be pretty much audience led from here on. So thank you so much, Ashwin, for that question there. So Clayton asks, considering every company is a software company, he applies in quotes today, how are your teams handling software security given the idiosyncrasies of modern development practices? Lester, I'll come to you for that one. What's your thoughts?
Sure, and I'll tie it to your first question as well. And so we've had to adjust our strategy in the context, not so much on if we should be doing something, but the time frame in which our roadmap articulates that. And so one of the examples of that is our awareness and security controls around consuming more services via the cloud and doing more by way of application development. And so we've taken a couple of steps where we've rejiggered our roadmap to emphasize that. So we're doing things like investing more in technology to do software code checking for application development. We're bringing in third parties to frankly do boot camps with, and in Maricopa County, we have 50 plus different departments. Some of them are disparate from centralized IT. So it's a very diversified technology organization. And so, but we're bringing in third parties to do boot camps on how to do secure coding. That coupled with the fact that all of us, I mean, some of us were more already on that journey more so than others. Maricopa County definitely saw an increase in the adoption of cloud-related services. And so now we have a greater exposure and risk associated with how are we consuming those cloud services? Do we have insight on what's going on? And, things that we didn't have to prioritize as much, like security around APIs and ensuring that those APIs are developed and used in a way that's secure. And so that's kind of some of what we've been tackling here at Maricopa County.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lester. Maureen, how about yourself? What's your thoughts there on Clayton's question around software security?
Software security is something we've been looking at for years. When you make medical devices, healthcare medical devices, and you're working with protected health information, you have to absolutely make sure that those devices are safe and secure and keep the data that is being collected private. So we have spent a lot of time and effort over the last 5 or 6 years developing our program in that area. Other areas are web and our websites have continuous scans, and we're looking at the pen testing and code reviews that needed to be there. In other places, I'll be honest, the code is not that important. So again, I think from a CISO perspective, you have to know what your assets are in your organization, and absolutely 100% on some things. Know your bill of materials, know what it's connected to, know what all the software is along the entire chain of how that's operated. In other places, you have a little more freedom. Your developers have a little more freedom, I should say.
Thank you so much. So many questions coming in. I'm absolutely loving this. But just on that last point there, Raj, it's great to see you join the panel. Would you like to chime in on that software security question?
Yeah, so I think that some things that we have done is that, first of all, making sure that the integrity of the software development and the software build process is maintained, so that malicious backdoors like SolarWinds can't be injected into our libraries, into our source code, right? So making sure that the integrity is maintained, their processes, as the software gets built from unit into integration into production type environments, that the integrity is checked. The other things we have done is that we have focused really on a security champions program, where we have injected security persons or personnel or trained developers to be security minded, that help through the implementation of security patterns that we publish on how to write secure code, right? So, and that has actually worked very well for us, and can work well for all of you if you think about that. And last, I think what we have done is we have also started to focus a lot more on the vulnerabilities that can actually be exploited, right? Because all of us have source code scanning tools. We can scan the source code, and sometimes you can find thousands of vulnerabilities. But I guarantee you that only 5% of them can ever be exploited at runtime. So I think we've got to start focusing on the vulnerabilities that can be exploited and block them, fix them, mitigate them, remediate them, rather than the 15,000 that may be out there in your ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Raj. Let's keep going with these questions. So Christy has written in and says, was just talking to someone about government mandates on private businesses for cybersecurity. And she asks, is this necessary or not necessary? Are companies too reactive and not proactive enough? Michael, I'm keen to bring you in on this conversation.
Yeah, thanks. This question right here is a completely different panel, completely different discussion to be had, because there's so many things kind of packed into this. And again, like other questions, you have people that really looking for the government for additional mandates, and you have people that not so much. Right now, we have guidelines and we have frameworks, and there are things that are in place. However, they don't have teeth, right? Because they're not mandates. The aspect around that, though, is that there's significant costs, which we all know, that we have to look into it. And we also understand that every business is completely different. I think one thing that hasn't been said yet is that as security leaders, our major goal is to mitigate risk, to understand what they are, understand how they impact business or industry, and then be able to make confident decisions about how we're road mapping and how we're using our resources to mitigate that risk. So I think from a mandate standpoint, it is definitely good. In my perspective, we need to put teeth into this to ensure that companies are spending the right amount of money, time, and due diligence in mitigating risk. But at the same time, we have to understand what that means and allow flexibility for different companies and industries to be able to apply the correct amount of resources and level of mandates that they need.
Thanks so much, Michael. Jack, how about you? What's your thoughts on this? Necessary or not necessary?
So, as someone who has spent most of her all of her cybersecurity career in mandated, regulated, heavily regulated industries, I started out in nuclear power plants and then moved into oil and gas. And now here I am in insurance and financial advice. We are heavily regulated, and I look at regulations as a good thing, simply because a lot of the regulations are simply best practices. And I think holding ourselves accountable to minimum security standards or best practices is a good thing. But to Michael's point, without the teeth and without the resources for those regulators to come and ask us questions and probe our security plans and roadmaps, it's kind of a waste of time almost. So I would like to see organizations such as some of the federal agencies that are supporting the development of some of those frameworks like the NIST CSF and CISA. I get a ton of resources from CISA, and yet they're woefully understaffed. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack. Brad, I know you wanted to jump in on this question as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that was already said. But one quick comment on that is that I think that these regulations or mandates, as we call them, should really set the ground floor, right? A uniform ground floor across the board that can, that minimum security requirements or control that need to be implemented. And then the companies themselves, based on their own risk or their advancement or their capabilities or their maturity, can set the ceiling of the controls that they want to go above and beyond in implementing. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Raj. Goodness me, I've got so many screens in front of me with so many messages coming up about questions because people are realizing, just as I am, that we have only 10 minutes left. Goodness me, this panel is going very quickly. I'll keep it going. So Hamang has written in and says, security breaches are increasing every day. What is the best strategy, according to the panel, to cope with the modern day challenges? Great question. Who wants to jump in on that one first? Eric, go for it.
To me, I always like to look at attacks and break them down into the simple components. And essentially, when you're looking at server-based attacks, and even what happened at Capitol, it comes down to two fundamental rules being broken. We have systems that are accessible from the internet that are missing patches, and we have systems accessible from the internet that are containing critical data that's not properly encrypted. I know people love complex answers, but it's simple. Any system accessible from the internet, make sure it's fully patched and up to date. And if you can't because of the software, it's not worthy to be on the internet. And any critical data must never, ever, ever reside on internet-facing systems. If you do those two things, 95% of all the attacks over the last 3 years would not have happened.
Amazing, Eric. Thank you. Karen, I know you were keen to get in on this question as well. What's your thoughts?
So my biggest, the marching orders and the banner cry of my team is automate or die. And the simple fact of the matter is you cannot afford or find enough human beings to be monitoring all your systems 24/7 by 365. So from my perspective, it's when looking at cloud infrastructure, having golden AMIs that have your security baked in, have automated remediation set up if you're using a cloud instance. I am also a big fan of the zero trust model. The hard candy shell, soft gooey center model of security really doesn't work anymore. Making sure that you've got those layers of security, internal firewalls, zero trust, automation and deployment of security tools, that's really what's going to increase the probability of a horrific breach and will increase your mean time to remediation, where you've identified that you do in fact have a breach and that you can close that gap very, very quickly. Humans cannot react as quickly as tools can, and especially interoperable tools that will do it for you and notify you of what they've done.
Amazing. Okay, well, let's keep going. I think so backstage here we have a private chat with all of the speakers so that we can check in on audience questions, and I'm getting absolutely littered with I want to jump in on this one. So thank you, man, for asking this question because it's seriously a hot topic here. Mark, I'll come to you next for your perspective.
Sure. I mean, I'll go back to what Eric was saying. It's really about simplicity, right? If you're going to get breached, imagine your headline on the Wall Street Journal. What are they going to say about you? And they had better say that you have a CISO, that CISO reports up to the board from time to time, and that you're doing the simple things like network segmentation and multi-factor authentication. Assume that people, cyber criminals right now, have your users' passwords in hand. What's going to stop them from getting in anywhere on the internet? And the simple answer is MFA. And time after time, we continue to see the headlines of companies not doing these simple things like segregating their assets and putting in these easy, proven technologies that are drop dead simple to implement and have really proven themselves. So it's not rocket science. It's really not.
Amazing. Let's keep going. Tyler, your thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree with what everybody said. I mean, it really is kind of simple. It comes down to making sure that you have proper segmentation, that you have proper security measures and preventative measures in place. But I also think this is a good convergence of the right tools and the right people. You know, I often hear people say that people are the weakest link in security, but I think that that's not entirely true. I think that people are also the strongest link when it comes to security, as long as people have a general understanding and a good security awareness platform from which to jump off from.
You're on mute, Catherine.
Yeah.
Of course I am.
Sure.
Because I would love to jump in on the topic too, as Willie
I
said.
definitely agree. However, if it was simple, like none of us would have jobs. So it's not really that simple, because we have to be those people who are looking at the overall picture, bringing people to the table, and most importantly, can make those conversations about the true risks that are out there, and then how we actually go forward to educate people on them. I believe that security awareness can't be underestimated. I think, going back to something I said earlier, I kind of believe the 80-20 rule, right? It's like 80% of this work is the blocking and tackling, the basic cyber hygiene. The last 20% is really tough, but that's, advanced persistent attacks and different things. So we do the basics around that. We can take care of most of everything out there, and we have to get people to believe that security is everyone's job, not just ours.
Yeah, that's certainly not the first time I've heard that, Michael. And I think the cultural aspect as well, and what that's brought about with COVID, and people working from home, and those constant reminders of actually being secure front of mind. Jack, go for it. I know you really wanted to jump in on this one.
Well, it's just interesting. I'd love to hear more about what the person who asked the question was thinking when they say the modern threat, because I look at security, and specifically cybersecurity, as the famous quote that Willie Sutton said, "Why do I rob banks? That's where the money is," right? So I'm always looking in my business, where is any money exchanging hands or crossing across parties? And with the global pandemic and so many of us now doing so much more business online, I think it's really important as security leaders that we root out and understand, where could people rob us or commit fraud? And that's really where I'm focusing my efforts. But I have to emphasize, underscore, underline, bold, italics, security hygiene 101. If you're not doing the basics, shame on you. And the regulators, I think, are just asking us to do the basics and check on that we're doing the basics. So I think we all need to up our game and challenge ourselves a little more.
There we go. A very hard line drawn by Jack there. Maureen, I know you were keen to jump in on this one.
Yeah, one of the important things is to look at also size and magnitude, and what are your assets. A lot of people, especially us as security practitioners, look to build bigger walls and deeper moats and hope that will protect us. And even some of the executive orders sounded a lot more like taller walls and more alligators in my moat. But the reality is, I'm not going to be able, there's no way that you're going to be able to protect everything. As we move into the digital world, it's not inside. It's not whether I expose it to the internet or not expose it to the internet. as we move into the digital world and work with third parties, no one is going to be able to make everything. Like, look around your house. Could you make and craft everything that you have in your house, or you're going to have to rely on others? So as we're in this world, it's a very connected world. It'll be more connected in the future. It'll be more data exposed on the edge. We're really going to have to look at what is critical and what important third parties are critical to us, and what is the risk to our organization, and move in, starting to look at the zero trust. Who accesses the data? Is it important whether they access the data or not? How they access the data and where are they coming from? Hence the need for multi-factor. Are we putting in multi-factor everywhere because it's more secure, or do we put it in where we need to have that increased security level? Is it intellectual property? Yes, monetizing, stealing the money out of the bank is one thing. I think we all get that. But as we look at what intellectual property do we have in the United States, what data are people trying to steal? With the Chinese population aging, and they're further behind in healthcare, why wouldn't you try to go after that intellectual property? So I think that as we look at our assets, as we move into the zero trust framework, we as security professionals have to open up our minds to the zero trust concept and how we're going to put this in place in organizations that have always had taller walls and bigger moats with more alligators.
Maureen, I love the passion you're bringing to this, and such great questions to pose. Now we are on time, but Lester, I did promise that you would jump in on this one, so feel free to wrap us up.
Right. So again, hopefully everybody who's on this takes away that we all need to go back to basics, make sure we're doing the minimums along those lines. I will say that, at least from our perspective here in Maricopa County, the problem is only going to get worse. We're consuming services in a different fashion. We're diversifying how we provide those services. As such, we need to not only practice what we preach in terms of defense, but also how do we respond? So from a ransomware perspective, you either pay the ransom or you restore from backups. But the nature of what we're all facing, whether it's insider threats, third parties, nation states, hacktivism, organizations are going to need to codify and practice how they respond to these threats. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when organizations are going to have to face the harsh reality that you've been successfully hit with ransomware or some form of malware or anything or everything in between. And so responsiveness and operationalizing your response along those lines is going to become more and more critical as well.
Lester, thank you so much for that contribution. Now, sadly, we have run out of time, but to our guests, thank you so much for your passionate contributions. Our audience have loved it. Unfortunately, there's lots of questions that do go unanswered, so I'm sure I'm going to have to look at all of your diaries and pop you another invite in the calendar to continue this very exciting conversation. But thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just like that, we have come to the end of our Top 100 panel discussion. It has been wonderful each week to chat to our Top 100 members. And do remember, if you would like to download the report, you can do so for free. There is a link in the description. Please do click on that one, and you can read all of the wonderful interviews that are within that report as well. Now, if you perhaps didn't catch our other live panels, we have gone across the globe in Australia, NEA, and of course the US as well. And if you would like to see those, you can pop over to the website and you will be able to access those on demand. So please do pop over. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.